Fitness for Life podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Lohr, and today I have with me Ryan Frecka. Ryan is an avid climber and personal trainer coming from Edmonton, Alberta. Is that right?
Correct.
Perfect. Ryan, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Typically, how I like to start things out, and audience will know this, but I like to hear kind of how you got into, initially training, and for you, I think climbing is important as well. How you first got into those things, and then also, what was your path that kind of led you to, being a coach, being a trainer, and specifically within the field of climbing. So talk us through that a little bit to start us off.
Sure. So before I started climbing, I didn't really have any exposure outside of maybe phys ed class for strength and conditioning. I started climbing when I was 20 years old, which is a bit late compared to a lot of people when they start now.
Yeah.
But a couple of years into climbing, I realized that the road for me had to revolve around strength, primarily for me, having no exposure to that. And so that led me down a rabbit hole of physiology, anatomy, all the aspects that you come to appreciate in a strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's cliche, but one thing led to another. I realized I needed it. I started building the skills, doing the exercises, understanding how I adapted to them, and now I like to share that with other people.
It was really just like got interested in a hobby, and that interest just developed into the skills you needed, because you were so interested in it, so deep into it, that you were like, hey, I love this. I need to, like, I'm getting actually good at this and good at helping people with this. So let's take the dive.
Yeah. And like recently starting my own business has been the deepest dive. It's a big step to take full time, but I feel like I've built the skills over the last decade or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a natural evolution, and people seem to really appreciate what I'm saying and doing for them, and people are getting stronger. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing a good service.
As a coach, when you see that in people, is like, it's one thing to just start coaching and see, okay, I can help people with a few things. It's another when you really start, like, actually recognizing the confidence in yourself and saying, like, okay, I know if somebody comes to me with a problem, if it's within the realm of what I do, I can help them. That's a really cool feeling. So it's good to hear that, even just pretty early within your career, because you've only been doing this about a year as a profession.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, you've been helping people for years on top of that.
Yeah, I've been making mistakes for a long time and learning from them.
Yeah. And honestly, that gives you, I think, entering the field at this stage, I think that gives you a leg up, because there's a humility and a wisdom that comes with a lot of that, of knowing, I entered the field at like 21 or 22, when I thought I was, hot stuff, and, wanted to correct everyone on everything. And now I'm like, I know nothing. I know I can help people when they come to me, but I never claim to, like, know all of it. And so that's why, having guys like you, all the guests that I have on here is really helpful. I want to dive in. One of the things that we had talked about before we got rolling was just the concept of having a little bit of mental flexibility. You've mentioned really wanting to hit that hard with, your audience, your clients. Talk to me about what mental flexibility looks like for you. I'd say both in the gym, in climbing, and in life. Like, I think there's a lot of applicability here.
Excuse me. I think the biggest thing for me is I have a lot of perfectionist tendencies. So I see this in a lot of people, the struggles that they have. It's this all or nothing mentality. If you can't have the optimal result, then it's maybe not even worth pursuing. Um,
Right.
so you can take that on a broad scale and apply that to basically anything. But I'll put it in the perspective of, let's say, strength training, right? So you go into the gym, um, and you want to smash out a bunch of squats, right? Let's say you're in a small gym. There's only one like really good squat rack,
Yeah.
and it's like the one that has safeties on it,
Mm.
but it's taken. And there's like a lineup of three new people in the gym that, are they're pointed towards that piece of equipment. You're
Yeah.
not going to have a chance in the 45 minutes you have that day. So what do? Do you scrap the session? As a coach, I would say definitely not. I think you're motivated to be there, and there's a way to get that stimulus for yourself. So if that means you grab a dumbbell and you elevate your heels and do a goblet squat, or if the leg press is available and it's convenient, you can do the same thing there. It's not
Right.
going to be ideal, but I don't think life is ideal, and I don't think it's practical to plan for the ideal situation.
No, that's great. And I think that's one of the things I really like my clients. So a lot of my clients have being older, and my audience being older, like I want them to recognize that, like, okay, the older we get, the more things like stress, sleep, recovery, like the more those things really affect us. And so, if you had a bad night of sleep and you have a big day coming up where maybe you're playing with grandkids or taking care of grandkids for a long period of time, maybe you've got a big workout that you had planned, or maybe even a competition. I know a lot of people I work with, pickleball tournaments is a thing.
Hell yeah.
Um, love pickleball. But like, maybe you're not feeling it that day. It might, there's all kinds of factors that affect us, and they affect us more the more we age. And so you might have to go into that session, like you said, or go into that day and recognize, like, okay, this day is just not going to go as I expected. That's okay. I'm going to move past it. I'm going to do the things I know that are going to help me, which for the gym example is like, okay, I'm going to still lift some weight. I'm going to still follow that same pattern that I had planned, but maybe I'm going to alter it just enough that what I changed to is now available to me. It's realistic, but it doesn't hurt me. It's, it doesn't make me, a jerk trying to hog a squat rack that needs,
Exactly.
that 10 people need in a 30-minute span.
Doing some bicep curls in the rack or something.
Just absolute stupidity sometimes. Obviously, I think the general lesson there is like, and I think we can expand this out, right? You talk about it being applicable to life. Like, I always have this conversation with my clients. It's like, hey, life happens. And so one of the things I always say with people is, listen, you have to hold loosely to what your plan for the day is, because the more time you put between the start of the day and whatever you have planned, like, the more time there is for it to get messed up. And so that's why I'm always encouraging, like, hey, our habits have to start at the beginning of the day, because if they don't, life's going to interrupt them.
100%.
And yeah, and some people have that ability to roll with things and let things roll off their back and to just adjust all the time up and down. But some people, like most people, I think it can really get to you if you let it.
Yeah, it can really impact your confidence. And like, once your confidence takes a big enough hit and you just don't recover from it, at least as soon.
Yeah.
So if we can, inspire confidence in the gym in any way, especially if you're just starting out, like,
Yeah.
you need the confidence more than anything. You
Yeah.
don't need to feel like you're failing every single session, because you're just not going to come back.
I think confidence is one of those things that people oftentimes mistake for motivation. Even is like, hey, they see people who are, super confident in the gym, and they see someone who's super motivated. Well, I think it's not necessarily a super motivated person. Sometimes they fall hand in hand. But sometimes a confident person in the gym is just someone who has educated themselves to the point where they they understand what they need to do, and they understand if plan A fails, I have a plan B, I have a plan C. So even just going in and saying, okay, don't feel like doing a whole lot today. My hip is giving me problems. My, XYZ is messing me up. All right, I'm gonna just do this.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So a perfect example of that, I injured my AC joint in
yeah,
my shoulder several months ago now, but I was in a big deadlifting kick. So
oh
I
yeah,
was trying to push my deadlift pretty hard. I wanted to hit that 500 pounds. Still haven't hit it, but I'm confident I'll get it.
yeah,
But the interesting thing for me is after talking to my physio, he said, you can still deadlift, but let's play with a couple different variations. I
mm,
ended up using a trap bar, using the low handles, which is the exact same range of motion, but instead
right,
of having a pronated grip, right,
yep,
I'm in a neutral grip. AC joint, didn't care at all. I was
right,
lifting the exact same weights, which is very curious to me. And I think that just comes, like you're saying, with experience in the gym. That
yeah,
confidence is like having made that mistake 10 times already
yeah.
and learned from it 10 times.
Great injuries are a great example. So like, a lot of people, if they've been listening or if they've been following me for a while, they know the last year has been for me a journey of recovery from, um, you know, my finger accident where I was prepping dinner, was not following knife safety rules, ended up slicing right into my hand, cutting a few tendons and a nerve. Um, for me, just been gotten to like the strongest I had ever been, the fastest I had ever been. And then here it is, excuse me.
COVID.
Now I have to, spend 10 to 11 months rehabbing and getting back to, where I can actually lift what I want. Um, and limitations to it. But the big thing for me is that now I know, I had the confidence to say, okay, once my doc clears me to lift, things can progress pretty quickly. Um, that holding it loosely, the mental flexibility I had to have was, okay, my grip is never going to be the same as it was, and to be the case, these are um, tendons that are just not going to be what they were beforehand. What I can do is train them um, to get stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where it might take 2 years, but I can actually, surpass what I had before. But for now, reaching that same level of strength for me requires wearing a um, using a wrap for everything.
Right.
Um,
I
and
was I was gonna ask, like, what is your adaptation for that? What is your modification? Do you use like a lifting strap or like a Versa grip or something?
yeah,
Gotcha.
that's so I have a pair of lifting straps, and I pretty much didn't use them at all prior to the accident, and now I have a set I keep at home and a set I carry with me in my car, because I know that like now if I go anywhere without them, the exercise is just not the same. Like grip is my limiting, whereas before, like sometimes fatigue would be or strength would be the limiting factor. Grip is it pretty much every time.
This actually brings up a really good point. So, like mentioning that I work with climbers,
Yeah,
there's so much identity in using our hands,
yeah,
and then especially when it's your primary sport or activity,
yeah,
that identity is so strong. And with a lot of climbers, we have things like like the pronated deadlift,
yep,
where grip can become a limiting factor. For climbers, it tends to be less so because we generally have quite strong of a grip. But
yeah,
if you're lifting for long enough, it still can become the limiting factor. And changing the perspective of somebody whose identity is built in how much they can grip
yeah,
all the time, um, making them use straps, making them use like a Versa grip, like a hook thing,
yeah,
um, is an amazing tool for making that stimulus like more in your back and your lower body and posterior chain than it is in your grip, which is the intention of that exercise specifically.
right.
um, but yeah, like how has that change been for you mentally, like having
Hmm.
that grip not there?
Give you I think one of the things that's just ironic is the day before I had my accident was the last day I was at a climbing gym.
Classic.
And for me, but it was like the first time I'd been in a little while, a little over a year, and I went with a buddy. He was like, "Hey, we should go. You know, I've got my membership. I can get you in for free." Awesome, cool, let's go. We go, and I ended up out climbing him, and he's a pretty tall. He's significantly taller than I am, so he has like that advantage, which is annoying sometimes. Just seeing people that are just tall that they don't care about beta or whatever. I don't really care about beta either, but you know, I try and climb. But now, so I have permanent change to. I basically can give up grip strength and get my extension back, or maintain this level of, you know, limitation. Um, in injury history, it seems like each one has come as a moment of humbling, of humility, of like I start to
Always.
get, you know, a little too proud of the progress that I'm making and attributing it, you know, just to me, and it seems like it's a humbling moment and a learning moment in each time. You know, I've had knee issues and ankle issues before in high school and college, and excuse me. So, you know,
Good
each
reminder.
each one of those, yeah, there you go. Each one of those moments to me has been a moment of humility, and I think the biggest thing for me in just understanding, the thing I've learned the most was just having a understanding of what a really long surgical recovery is like, and understanding the frustrations with extended lack of mobility, that yeah may or may not come back, and recognizing that that is a possibility. So yeah, shift for me is just saying like, hey, because of the way this had to heal, because of the timeline of the surgery and the accident, like there was more time between the accident and then the surgery that there should have been, because I got some bad advice from an ER physician, unfortunately. Yeah, and so yeah, combination of factors have led me to just kind of accepting like the situation for what it is. But a lot of the clients I serve are that way. You know, they have some form of long-term surgery that left them with either immobility or pain, and so you know that's helped me to work with them, and help me to understand what they go through to some degree. Right, it's a finger, you know,
Yeah,
compared
and
to a hip.
like as exercise professionals, coaches, I think that's why so many of us are passionate about information consumption as well.
Yeah,
Because your outcome could have been very different had you received different information,
yeah,
or they, just done the due diligence to check with someone who is an expert in that field.
yeah,
Um, Not to say that your outcome, with your finger can't still be good.
right,
I think it can be. Um,
yeah,
I'm always surprised by the resilience of the human body,
yeah,
and the adaptation of capabilities. But yeah, that's been something that I've focused on a lot lately.
mm,
Um, and I can also empathize with your finger. So I don't know if you've seen a lot of climbers' fingers, but they're all kind of like weird. I have this one here. I don't know if you can see it,
yeah,
but it doesn't really bend all the way, compared to this one. And I'll
gotcha.
try and avoid flipping off the camera too hard because it's my
Yeah,
middle
no,
finger.
you're good.
Uh, but the reason is actually somewhat similar in
Okay,
that
yeah,
I injured it, central slip, if anyone cares, right here. And it took about a year for the pain symptoms to manifest. So at that
wow,
point, I probably not going to gain full range back, but this has been probably a 70% improvement over what it
yeah,
was. Like it was like stuck like this
yeah,
before.
wow,
So yeah, about 6 months later, and it's significantly improved. So I
Cool.
would expect that you get quite a bit back, but it wasn't without quite a bit of work.
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and appropriate treatment from a physio who understood hands and climbing,
Yeah.
which is very important.
Yeah. No, that's a good, definitely a good point. Somebody who understands what you're going through is always valuable, and who really understands like the rehab process. Um, occupational therapist who was a hand specialist,
Nice.
really knew what she was doing. Really helped with that process. And my rehab, because I actually started, my first career was as a athletic trainer or sports physio, basically. Um, and did the rehab process pretty well. I just didn't understand the very specifics of, the initial getting moving, and so that was helpful for her to kind of fill in that gap where I didn't know what I was doing. Whereas with most things, I can write that and do that physical therapy for myself,
Mhm.
or that rehab for myself. But this was something I was like, I know nothing about hand tendon rehab from a repair. So this is
Yeah.
going to be a big learning process for me. And I did learn a lot.
It's
So,
interesting in climbing, like it doesn't seem like we have a shortage of people that are willing to do the baseline physio. So
mm,
like someone has a finger injury, getting them back to normal function, like I don't want to say pain free, but
yeah,
like less irritating day to day.
yeah,
Um, there's a lot of people available and a lot of like great reputable professionals, but there aren't a lot of people that will take you from that kind of like base level back to sport.
yeah,
That's still, it's starting to become bigger and there's more people focused on it. But that's something that I wanted to try and fill the gap with
yeah,
and work with physios in a collaborative sense so that clients don't have to pay $120 an hour, um,
yeah,
and they can still get the same like level of treatment and care, while also getting stronger and getting more confident in returning to their sport.
yeah.
So it's kind of reversed.
I think it's definitely something that, for me in the States, like one of the things I see is like return to sport. Excuse me, goodness.
No worries. You'll cut it in post, right?
But for return to sport, oftentimes insurance ends up being kind of the limiting factor
Right.
in, because most people only get approved for so much time, when it comes to, I won't say smaller injuries, but injuries that don't require surgery. They very rarely get the full care they need, before insurance companies are like, all right, you're good. You should be fine by now. And then they stop paying for things, and then things get crazy expensive in the States. So that's frustrating to see. But on the flip side of things, like most surgical procedures get, you know, fantastic continuity of care from start to finish, when it comes to like a return to sport basis. So that is cool to see. I'm hoping, like yourself, I like to stand in the gap when I can, in those scenarios. But and I really like to do, especially if someone, so working with people who are older, joint replacements is something I often see. Um, and so, because what we know is that the stronger you go in,
Yeah.
the stronger you're gonna and easier you're gonna come out. And
Uh,
so one of the things that, and I'll let you go here in a second. One of
sure.
the things that I like have loved kind of educating on some of those clients is, hey, if you have a knee replacement, you need to build your upper body strength because you're going to be either on crutches or a walker, and you got to be able to lean on that, and you know, let that take some of the pressure off your knee. Otherwise, you're going to feel like not doing a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like I, whenever that conversation comes up, I've had a couple of clients recently that are going into major surgeries.
Yeah.
One just had theirs. And it's kind of, what's the baseline of your physical activity,
Right.
right? Like if you can do a squat with plus 100% of your body weight on your back,
Yeah.
you're definitely going to be able to get off the couch even if you've just undergone surgery.
Yeah.
Right, because your baseline is going back to, you build up here, you lose that because you've had your hip replaced, right? But now you only have to recover, this much.
Right.
You're going to be at a functional level even at a deficit.
Yeah.
Ideally, not in all cases, but I think that's a pretty generous analogy.
That's the thing. I always use this example of, I used, when I was working in sports medicine, I was working for a ice hockey team. And I had this gentleman who somebody missed on inspection. He had a laceration. They one of his tendons was completely severed. It was post tib tendon, and that's a pretty major thing. And so I'd say a couple weeks go by, and he's like, hey, this doesn't feel right. Like something feels off in the way that my foot is working right now. Like I know we sewed it up. I know it's healing really well. Something doesn't feel right. So they, did a little ultrasound and figured that out. And so then we were looking like, hey, we got to see if you can even get surgery, because like those tendons, they shrink up pretty quickly if they're not connected. And so, but if you know anything about hockey players, their tendons, especially in their foot and their ankles, are
Strong as shit.
Yeah, they're super strong. Like anyone who's tried to ice skate for more than an hour without any prep knows that. That your feet kill after that. And so his tendons were so thick that the surgeon came out and he's like, yeah, he comes out of surgery and he's like, we went in, we saw it. I didn't even think I was going to see it. He's like, we saw it. We had enough to anchor to. We connected it. I think he's going to be fine. And now he's skiing and doing whatever the heck he wants. It's a couple years later now, but
yeah,
to
and
me,
that's not an isolated case,
right,
either.
right.
Like, talk to any surgeon and they'll tell you the exact same thing that we're talking about now. Like,
Yeah.
It's not my scope. I'm not in rehab. I'm not a physio,
Sure.
but I do talk to other professionals, and
Right.
yeah, every surgeon will tell you the same thing. The person that comes in with more muscle mass, that has like a better metabolic profile,
Yep.
they're all going to do better.
Yeah.
But getting there is where the art of training comes in. Yeah.
I think this brings up two things that I want to continue to talk through. One, and this is something I've had to work through. When you have something like this happen, obviously there's a new, excuse me, new normal for you. So at least to some degree, at first, when you're working through rehab, you're working through training. Pain are both things you have to get comfortable with, and I feel like that's something that people overlook, and a lot of people, they haven't been exposed to that type of physical discomfort yet. And maybe that's not true for the people that you serve, because climbers are often used to being in a lot of discomfort.
I think I think it's different though. Like,
Yeah.
So I do want to preface that, pain management is not my scope. So
Yeah, sure.
what I am going to talk about will all be anecdotal. But
Okay.
Climbers, like, the discomfort that we feel a lot of times is necessity, especially when it comes to something like outdoor climbing, where the holds themselves are very sharp. There's this implied amount of discomfort, and your expectation is set really early. Maybe not your first time outside. You're probably going to be in for a bit of a sharp experience, pun
Right.
intended.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is like, especially in terms of skin pain,
Yeah.
that discomfort starts to change your perspective on like what we can adapt to and what is okay, what goes away, and what gets worse.
For me, the people that I work with, they're all pretty much starting out in pain. So like we're starting from a pain baseline, and the things I do with them help them with pain usually, but we're not directly trying to rehab an injury usually. And again, having that medical background, medical license, like I'm able to step across scopes a little bit,
For sure.
where not everybody is. So that's that. Again, standing in the gap is what I'm doing there a little bit, but so just so
I
people
will I will add one
hear
thing.
this, go ahead.
So yeah, you're talking about pain and movement kind of as medicine, that approach.
Yeah.
I do think it is interesting to bring up that it's a bit of a paradoxical relationship,
Yeah.
at least like internally for people. Like, how would engaging in an activity that typically causes me pain make that pain either lessen in the
Mm.
course of that? And how does like adding load actually make it go away in some cases? That's obviously very contextual, but I do think it's natural to be very skeptical of that because it like logically it doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
someone, especially someone who's new to exercise. Why would adding load to this make it feel better?
I mean, what I have gotten, we could be here for years talking about pain science because it's incredibly complex.
Make like
And
a Stronger by Science episode of like,
oh my gosh,
6 hours.
yeah, it's
Shout out to
incredibly complex. And yeah, seriously, shout out to those guys for educating the heck out of everything. But yeah, I try, and the simplest way I can say it for a lot of people is that times, and again, I'm trying not to overgeneralize here.
it's tough.
Sometimes pain is a response to weakness, and get too general. That is sometimes the case. Pain can be that response to weakness, and so if we find small ways to strengthen that, again, don't get us. We're not going from 0 to 100. We're going from like 0 to 5, and
Important distinction.
taking these steps. Yeah. Taking these progressive steps. We talk about progressive overload being a core foundation of fitness. I think it has the same thing to do with rehab, right? Is if you don't take the small steps to get where you want to go, or if you don't do if you don't do the things are going to strengthen something, then really the opposite is going to be true. Like every that is going to weaken it. If it's few, far between, and unplanned with the right building blocks in place. I don't know if that was a good answer to your question or what, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, we're just basically shooting the shit here.
yeah.
Hopefully, you don't have to dub that out either. I've been trying to be careful not to swear too much. I've been hanging out too much at the gym.
No, no. I think yeah, pain is tricky because everybody's got a baseline. Everybody, everybody's brain interprets things differently. I know sometimes people with high anxiety levels, like their pain is just up, but sometimes like just they register pain more easily than others. And a lot of times what I'm doing with those people is just trying to use mental tools to help reduce that pain threshold, or start so that they're they tolerate more easily. And
I
then
think
some. Go
we
ahead.
can make an analogy here that's kind of interesting. So, there are a few studies that have come out talking about the. I'm just going to use percentage of when at max that people
Sure.
are capable of.
Yeah.
So when they first come to the gym, I think the number was around 80% of people aren't actually able even to reach the RPE.
Right.
So that's rating of perceived exertion for anyone listening that isn't familiar with that, but probably will be.
Yeah.
RPE like 6 and greater. So how close you can
Oh
come to
wow.
failure.
Yeah.
most people can't even hit that when they first step in the gym.
Mm.
And I think the same can probably be said, although an oversimplification of pain. But you don't know what you're experiencing until you experience it.
Yeah.
And the same happens whenever I train people. Is the first few weeks they're going to see quite a bit of progression,
Yeah.
and then we're going to get to a week we're going to have to audit them. We're going to do like an AMRAP or some sort of like strict rep and like a few sets to try and build that fatigue till they have that little bit of like a fight for a rep, and then it clicks and they go, oh shit, I haven't been trying at all. And the same is true for rehab, at least in my personal experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to like poke into it a little bit
Yeah.
to know that it's okay.
Right. Yeah. No, I think especially early, and especially if you're talking about surgery, one of the things, if you've ever seen a full like ACL rehab,
One of my friends actually snapped her ACL in front of me.
Oh,
We were at this game company. You
yeah.
probably don't have them there, but there's like lasers on the wall, and you have to jump over the lasers.
Okay.
She landed. Like I heard the snap.
Mm.
I watched it happen, and
Yeah.
she is in for surgery in like a month's time.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine just went through the whole process, got the surgery, is now like back to squatting. It's not short.
And anyone will tell you the first couple weeks, I'd say the first month or two, as the person who has like performed the rehab, who's been like working with patients, you cannot be kind to that person who is recovering, because you have to at some point you literally have to take their hip and their lower leg and shove them into knee flexion against the scar tissue that's building up. Like,
yeah, the big one I've seen is like you have your foot elevated,
yeah,
and then you have like a weight on your knee to try and just like a sandbag
to
or
bring
something
it down,
to try and push it down a little bit.
Yeah,
because
so
your
that's
knee
the
resists
first thing
so
you
much.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the first thing you do is just getting that full extension. But then once you've gotten extension, then flexion is the thing, and trying to get through all of that is brutal. And anyone who says otherwise, you might need to go do that again.
It's brutal. It's brutal, but in the right hands, you will tolerate it.
Right. Yes.
And you will recover, and it will be beneficial to your outcome.
To avoid that hard work, especially in rehab, a lot of times the outcomes aren't as good, right? Like you don't get the range of motion back that you want. You don't get the strength that you want. And I think that's kind of where I was going with the initial responses. Like, hey, if you want to be strong, resilient, if you want to break through some patterns of pain, you do have to go through some of that. You have to pay the price on one end or the other. So when you choose it, when you know it's the thing that is the more difficult up front, when you're paying that price, it's a whole lot better in the long run than if you're paying it at the end.
So I have a bit of a side question here.
Yeah, sure.
Like in your position, in your role as a
Yeah.
coach, how much of your job, I know the answer for me, how much of your job do you think is referring to people like exercise professionals that work specifically with ACL rehab and have that knowledge? How much of your job is actually referring to other people that might be better suited to a specific client or need?
With very rarely is it that I'm referring out, because usually it's like, hey, they've already had the thing, like they've already gotten the surgery, and they're on the flip side of that. But I would say, so I currently serve 20 some clients. Of that, I've referred 4 out to other providers, particularly surgeons or nurse practitioners or other other providers So that's I guess about a, a, a
It's
little
like one
less
in
than,
five.
yeah, a little less than a quarter. Yeah.
But like as a statistic,
Sure.
20% is
That's a lot.
pretty high in any
Yeah.
population. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good, and I don't have a like specific person that I refer to for, one thing, because at the point where most of my clients are, they're in their 50s and up. Most people already have their person, the person they
It's true.
trust, person that they've worked with for a little while at this point. Probably something has come up before. Now, if they do, if they are open to suggestions, we live within 30 minutes of a really fantastic um, teaching hospital, and they have everything under the sun. So very easy to just refer out to them, because we know that they're going to do a good job.
Yeah, and
So
I would say for myself, it's probably one in five. Although recently it's been almost one in three, I would say,
okay, yeah,
for like people that I've had intakes for in the past 6 months.
yeah,
Yeah,
there you
and
go.
that's people that have not gotten an injury necessarily. Like hopefully not for me.
Yeah,
I like sometimes clients do get injured. That does happen, but
sure,
I've been lucky enough that I haven't had any. But yeah, getting injured, like cutting their hand
right,
with a knife,
yeah,
or playing a game and like snapping their ACL. Like
yeah.
life
Life
happens.
happens. Yeah, yeah, man. We are coming up on time in terms of where we want to be. Um, Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on. Love to having our chat. And it's me more questions I think than I expected to get asked.
Especially
Um,
considering the cold that you have, I should have maybe asked less, maybe talked a bit more.
not not a problem. Not a problem. I love it. We'll have to do it again sometime soon. But Ryan,
For sure.
for anyone who's listening, where can they find you?
The easiest place is probably on Instagram. My handle is just rfrecka, so RFRECKA,
Perfect.
or at freckafitness.com.
Heard it here. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, Jackson.